I have spent my entire career either working for or leading nonprofit organizations. But I had a realization recently that although I've spent lots of time thinking about fundraising and management and event planning, what I've actually spent the most time thinking about and kind of obsessing about is work itself and our human relationship with work. How work fits into our lives, whether work makes us happy or doesn't, how work helps us feel fulfilled or successful, and even things like how email changes our behavior and our psychology. Thinking about this has invaded my life so much that I actually almost derailed my now fiance's planned proposal by launching into a passionate rant about the connection between email and Groundhog Day and Gantt charts 5 minutes before he was about to propose to me. Luckily, he understands why I am passionate about this, and he asked for me to marry him anyway. But my passion for this really stems from the fact that to me, there's nothing much beyond work that has such a profound impact on our day-to-day lives. It's what helps us put a roof over our heads. It's what helps us have food in our stomachs. And it's also something that's supposed to help us feel fulfilled and feed us in terms of mind and spirit. But one of the things that I've been noticing is that we keep seeking meaning and happiness and fulfillment, but it feels like less and less are we able to find those things in work. So the Gallup organization just came out with a study that said that only 22% of us are actually engaged and thriving at work. 22% of the entire American population is even slightly happy with their work, which is a little bit crazy given the fact that almost 100% of us will spend at least a third of every moment that we are here on Earth working in some capacity or another. And my curiosity and obsession with work has also been tied to my personal experience with work. The ups and downs and ebbs and flows, and my experience of seeing that work can both lift you up and can be soul-crushing and push you down. So I'm going to tell you the story of two relationships, not my relationships with men, but my relationships with work. And my first relationship started in my first job after college. I had Girl Scouts as a fundraising associate. And as you might expect, I had certain ideas of what I thought working there was going to be like. Girl Scouts seems like a friendly, warm, fuzzy organization. And it does have an incredibly noble mission and is full of well-meaning people. But I quickly discovered that what I thought it would feel like to work there and what it actually felt like to work there were two completely different things. Girl Scouts had somehow, over its 100-year history, developed layers and layers of hierarchy and red tape, and developed this sort of system of how it treated people that was devoid of any trust. So when I first started, we had a CEO who would stand at the front door with a clipboard. And as we came into the office every morning at our start time of 8 a.m., if we were more than 5 minutes late, we would be written down on the clipboard. If I wore a skirt, I was expected to wear pantyhose. If I wanted to take, or any employee wanted to take a couple hours at the end of the day to leave work early and go to their kid's soccer game or take them to the doctor, they couldn't just leave. The vacation system that we had and leave system that we had was you could only take time off in half-day increments. So if you wanted to leave early, you had to fill out a time off slip and get your supervisor to approve it before you could take your child to the doctor. And mind you, we employed 95% working families. And as a fundraiser, I had to do lots of fundraising lunches, so when I was picking the menu, I'd get to the point of picking whichever chicken we were going to serve at lunch. But I had to run my chicken choice by the CEO before I could submit the order. And at first, I just kind of took this as it was and thought to myself, well, maybe this is how work is. I'm really young. I have no idea what a workplace is supposed to be. Maybe this is what I've been waiting for. This is what it's going to be. But as time went on, and I watched how that setup impacted me and impacted everyone else in our organization, I realized very deeply that something was wrong. I was there for 5 years, eventually became the chief operating officer, and then 5 years in, the CEO before me left, and I was appointed as CEO. And all of a sudden, I had this opportunity. We had a staff of 55 people, and I looked around and they were all miserable. There was no innovation happening. Our membership had been declining for 10 years, and I thought, all right, I've got to do something. So the first thing that I decided to do was implement a flexible work program. And my first iteration of it, now that I look back on it, was a little bit lackluster. What I decided to do was offer managers of a certain level and above the opportunity to apply to work from home 1 day a week. I was getting ready to launch this program, and one of my employees pulled me aside. And she said, Jessica, why is it that this program is only available to the highest paid people in the organization? Why do people like me, the lowest paid people in this organization, not have access to the opportunity? And why do we not have access to saving money on gas and commuting costs? Do you trust us less? I didn't know what to say. I'd never thought about work like that before. It was this switch flipping in my head saying we have to think about this differently. And I realized in that moment that as a leader of an organization, I had an incredibly unique opportunity to either make work a place that sucked for people and that took all of the life and vivacity out of them, or helped build that up. So I had this realization that as the leader of the organization, I could have this impact. But I was going about it wrong. And luckily for me, about 2 weeks later, I ran across a book called Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It, which was perfect because I was trying to figure out how to make work not suck. And it was written by 2 women who had helped Best Buy's corporate headquarters transition from a regular work environment to what they called a results-only work environment, a ROW, which meant that every employee had the opportunity to choose where they wanted to work, when they wanted to work, as long as the work got done. And I read this book in one sitting and realized that this felt like it was the defibrillator paddles that our organization needed to jolt everything back to life. So within a month, I had implemented ROW at our organization, and we became the first nonprofit in the country to be a results-only work environment. And pretty much overnight, I saw dramatic changes. All of a sudden, we went from saying that we trusted our employees to actually showing that we trusted our employees by giving them complete control of their time. And just as quickly, people started innovating, taking risks, coming up with new ideas, asking big questions about why we did what we did the way that we did it. I saw people start losing weight because for the first time in years, they felt like they had enough control of their time to be able to go to the gym in the morning before they came to work. I saw families interacting more, people reconnecting with their daughters and sons in ways that they had not been able to when we controlled every aspect of their time. It wasn't perfect. There were definitely challenges. But that relationship with work in the context of that organization taught me so much. It taught me that we need to question the rules. I had walked into that work environment kind of thinking that the rules of work were like rules of nature, laws of nature, that it was like gravity, that all of this stuff was inevitable and we had to just deal with it and suck it up. But when I really stopped to think about it, every construct of work that we know, whether it's the Monday through Friday work week, the fact that we work 40 hours in a week, that we work 9 to 5, that we show up at an office, all of those things are human constructions. 100 years ago, they didn't exist in the way that they do now. We made them up. So if we made them up, then we can make up something better in their place. I also, through my experience of doing the results-only work environment, learned something very important about myself, which is that I have a tendency, when I'm passionate about something, to do nothing but that. And I remember our HR director asking me at one point before we switched to the results-only work environment, Jessica, do you have a hobby? And I said, no, I don't have a hobby. Work is my hobby. I love work so much that if I try doing anything else, I just want to go back and do more work. And that might have sounded great and actually worked really well when I was 24 and 25 years old. But I'd gotten to the point when I was 7.5 years into working at Girl Scouts where that didn't feel quite as good anymore. And I realized that your work life is not like a crock pot. You can't set it and forget it and then just expect that 5 years later, the stuff that you set when you were 25 is still going to be working for you when you're 30. So I walked away from Girl Scouts having learned all of this, but realizing that the organization didn't want to change in many ways as much as I wanted it to. So I did my first big reboot, and I bought a one-way ticket to New York, sold all of my stuff in California, funded my move partially by selling my car, got one freelance gig, and on the plane on the way here, had remembered that a friend had tweeted about some tech event in New York. And I was looking for things to do when I arrived, and I was Googling around and found New York Tech Meetup. So I signed up to be a member of the Tech Meetup. My profile for a while on New York Tech Meetup actually said, hey, I'm Jessica. I'm really excited. I just quit my job and I'm moving to New York and I'm really excited to be here. So I arrive in New York, and 2 weeks after I arrive, I go to my first Tech Meetup. And I'm sitting in the front row, and 2 board members come out. And they announce that for the first time, New York Tech Meetup is looking to hire someone to lead the organization. They had just become a nonprofit, and they needed someone with nonprofit management experience, with fundraising experience, with event planning experience. And I'm looking at this list, sitting in the front row, going like, this is really weird, because that's like my entire resume up on the screen. And I had decided, though, before I arrived, that I was going to take a break from working for organizations. I was done. I wanted to freelance. So I actually didn't do anything with this information for about 2 weeks. But then I woke up one Sunday morning, and I had 2 key realizations. The first was that I had been freelancing for, I don't know, all of a month, and I realized it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, or at least it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I think what I got confused was the difference between control of my time and creative freedom. And after spending about 4 weeks freelancing, I realized that control of my time and creative freedom are 2 different things, and that the presence of one doesn't guarantee the presence of the other. Because I could wake up anytime I wanted, but the client I was working for dictated what I was doing. And to me, that wasn't enough. I needed more room to stretch my creative legs. The second thing I realized is that I was just being stupid. I had painted a picture of myself being this freelancer without really thinking about the fact that I wasn't sure that that's what I wanted to do, and that there was this amazing opportunity standing in front of me, and I would be really dumb not to take it. So I remember spending 14 hours making my cover letter and resume, sending it off to the Tech Meetup, and I pretty quickly got a call inviting me to come in for an interview. And 6 weeks later, I was standing on the stage at Tech Meetup, being introduced to the community, and all of a sudden I'm in charge of this organization. And it was everything that I thought it would be. It was kind of perfect in a lot of ways. So I get a paycheck every 2 weeks, I get health insurance, I have complete control of my time, I have creative freedom, and I work for an organization doing awesome things. That sounds pretty awesome. The one thing that I kind of forgot to take into account was that they were hiring me as the only employee. So there was no one else to share any of what I was doing with. We had a volunteer board of directors, and they're incredibly supportive and have stepped in many times, but this work is not their day job. And so I realized I was responding to emails and trying to figure out how to fundraise for us so that we would survive, and paying every single bill, and putting on every single event, and doing all of these things, and that creative freedom that I was so excited about got kind of squished into a corner, sort of pushed off the agenda by all of that daily administrative stuff that I needed to do. At the same time, that lesson that I had learned at Girl Scouts about balancing work and the other aspects of my life, about taking periods for work and periods for renewal, that lesson somehow dissolved. And I think it was largely because I had never been in a situation before where what I did so directly impacted what was going to happen with the organization. So if I didn't respond to emails, there wasn't anybody else who was going to. If I didn't write a pitch deck for sponsors, we weren't going to have a pitch deck. And if I didn't do all of these things, the organization could fail. And that was a very different feeling than the feeling I had having 55 people supporting me in our work at Girl Scouts. So I paid a lot of attention to the health of the organization, but I stopped paying a lot of attention to my own personal health and well-being. And it's really made me stop and think and say, why? Like, I know all of this stuff. There's so much evidence out there. I read tons and tons of books about the downsides of overwork, about how we're kind of killing ourselves by working too much, not sleeping enough, not having enough time for renewal. And I realized that it's not because we don't have enough evidence, and it's not because we don't know better. I think it's because we're at this really pivotal moment in our relationship with work as a society. So if you think back to the early 1900s, during the Industrial Revolution, 1904 or so was when the term Protestant work ethic was coined. And Protestant work ethic refers to this idea that if you suffer through your work, you will reach salvation, which I feel was kind of convenient, given that there were lots of people who were building these giant factories who needed people to work 18 hours a day. And what better way to keep them motivated to stay there than to say, guess what? I know this sucks right now, but the more you suffer and the harder you work, there's a great path right up to heaven for you. Couple that with the fact that we had the Great Depression, our world wars, and we became a society that was focused on work for simply sustaining ourselves, for fulfilling that first level of Maslow's hierarchy. We have that, and then we have the background of being raised to basically focus on what are we going to be when we grow up? What are we going to do for work? How successful are you going to be at work? Everything is focused on that hard work. And within the entrepreneurship and business community, a lot of times we still see that it's focused on scarcity, it's focused on competition, it's focused on urgency. There's this drive to do more, keep working, keep working, keep working. On the flip side of that, we have what started happening in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We started getting more prosperous. Then positive psychology came into our world. People started talking about self-help and happiness. At the same time, one of the key pots of gold that we used to work for and work disappeared. The pension. We used to, in addition to the Protestant work ethic, get motivated to keep working in jobs that sucked because there was a really nice pension at the end. So we take that away, you add in the fact that people are focusing on happiness, that we're feeling a bit more prosperous. Now we start having lots of research coming out saying, you're killing yourself by sitting at your desk all day, you're working too much. Too much work actually makes us less productive. And we hear things like, when we're on our deathbeds and we're dying, the thing that we're going to regret is not that we worked too much, but that we didn't spend enough time with our families. So now, I sort of constantly feel like I'm in this position where when I'm working, I feel guilty and feel like I should stop working. And when I'm not working, I feel guilty and feel like I should start working. And I think some of this also comes from habit. So the work habit is a habit of stress and relief. You feel stressed because you need to get something done, you do it and you feel relief. And the challenge that we all face is that relief often mimics happiness. And when we have that feeling, we keep cycling back into that again and again and again. So the big lesson that I'm kind of sitting on and thinking about a lot right now is what do we do with this? Because it feels like there's this duality, there's this tug of war that needs to be solved. And I think a big part of it is realizing that we actually don't really need to solve it. Because I think that if we add intention and we add a level of presence to both the work that we do and the other things that we do outside of that work, we get to a place where we can both wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to spend 10 minutes meditating and not jump right into my inbox. and be in a place where we say, I am so excited about this idea and my brain is on fire, I'm going to stay up really late to work on this. And if we're intentional about both of those things, then I don't think there has to be a winner of that tug of war. And although this feels really challenging right now, and I actually did this little outline, I was really curious the other day how many hours of my working life I've actually spent doing work and other activities. So in the last 11 years, I have worked 29,000 hours. I've slept 26,000 hours, but then the numbers drop. I've spent 12,000 hours with my friends and family. I've only probably spent about 562 hours working out, and I've spent maybe 115 hours meditating. And people are a little bit scared to talk about work-life balance or don't like the term because it implies that work and life are separate, and I absolutely agree, but there is definitely a work and other stuff. And I do think that that intentionality and that presence is so incredibly important for helping us tweak those ratios. And although sometimes this feels challenging and really scary, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know which way to go with this, I think the fact that we're in this challenging period points to something amazing. And this alludes to something that Alexis was kind of saying too, that we've never had this much choice before. We've never had this much opportunity. We are so incredibly lucky that we get to say, I want to find fulfilling and meaningful work, and here's how I'm going to attempt to do that. There's so many people before us, and still a lot of people in the world that don't have an opportunity to do that. And to me, that's the huge possibility that exists with work, and that's why I'm so passionate about it.